In today's video, we're going to have a look at what Home Assistant is, and if you stick around till the end, I'll give you my pros and cons of why you should use Home Assistant. So I think before we dive into what Home Assistant is, we should talk about what an actual smart home is. Let's have a look at how a typical smart home is made, and then we'll have a look at some of the limitations of this setup without using Home Assistant. So smart homes are made up of a collection of different devices and products that ultimately are smart, and they allow you to do things that you can't normally do with bog standard products. Things such as lights. Smart lights allow you to control that light with your voice or by an app on your phone. You can do things such as turning the light on and off, or just change the colour or the temperature of that light. And it's not just lights, you can get plugs, controllable LEDs, cameras, motion sensors, robotic vacuums, and much more. And these devices are usually internet connected, and they offer you a form of remote control over their primary functionality. So again, you can use phone apps to control them, or you can use popular voice assistants like Alexa and Google Home just to take control of them. So in short, smart homes are homes that have internet connected devices that can be controlled remotely by your phone or by voice assistant. I should also add in that these devices can give notifications based on changes, so they could send you text message notifications, emails, or just sort of general phone pop-up notifications. So once you start amassing these devices and building up your own smart home, you'll find that you quickly run into some limitations if you're not using a form of automation system or automation hub, and we'll start discussing some of those limitations now. So you start building up your smart home, you have a bunch of these different devices, and each one of these devices is from a different manufacturer. And you'll quickly find that each manufacturer wants you to download their app to control their device. So, say you get 4 or 5 different devices, that's quickly 4 or 5 different apps. And if you have more, each one's a different app, and you quickly amass a huge app library of various apps that are used to control your smart devices. So that kind of takes away the dynamic of the whole smart device, because say you want to turn your lights on or turn on a particular device, you've then got to search through your phone for the specific app in order to do the specific thing you want it to do. And having to search through multiple apps just to do this isn't very smart. Having all these different apps is what's known as app segregation, and a lot of these apps can only control specific brands of smart devices, and again that ties you into that whole using one app for one device. And at this point you're probably thinking, why can't I just have one app to control all of my devices? Well, Amazon, Apple and Google all thought the same thing, and what they did is they allowed developers to create integrations for their smart speakers which allow them to let their device be controlled by voice or by the Amazon or Google app. What this means is you can link your smart device with your Amazon app or your Google app, and you can then control it with that one app, turn it on and off, do all the various tweaking that you can do, or you can use the Alexa or Google Home service to control that device with your voice. So you'll hear me use the term integrations a lot, and what I mean by that is an integration is kind of like a driver. It's the bit of software basically that goes in the middle, so it goes in between your smart device and your smart automation system, or in this case it goes between your smart device and the Amazon Echo Google Home. So it's that bit in the middle, and it allows them to sort of talk and communicate with each other. So this sounds good. You've got your Amazon or Google app that you can just control everything with, but it's not that simple. The integrations I mentioned, it's down to the actual manufacturer of your smart device to create that integration, and once they create it, they need to maintain it and keep it updated in order for it to allow the Amazon Echo and Google Home to actually control that device. The limitation here could be if it's just a small company the development could be slow for this integration. So you might say have a bunch of different smart plugs which the integration stops working, and that integration doesn't get fixed for several weeks just because it's a small company working on that integration. Alternatively, that manufacturer may decide they don't want to keep updating their integration, and it just falls out of the whole Apple and Google ecosystem then, so you can no longer control that device with your Amazon or Google apps. Products that make use of the Amazon and Google services are usually denoted with these kinds of icons. So if you don't see this icon on your smart device packaging, chances are that there's not an integration for this. Apple also have something similar with their Apple HomeKit. So next up, we're going to have a look at cloud services, and this kind of is and isn't a limitation, but it depends how you look at it. So the positive is that most smart devices now are sort of out of the box setup, and what this means is you can literally take it out of the box, plug it in, connect it to one of these cloud services, and it will just work. So say a lot of smart cameras these days, you buy the actual camera unit, you plug it in, you download the app and enter your details, and then it's good to go. You can start viewing it on your phone or on the computer, and it's all controlled and managed by a cloud service. Now, cloud services are great because they allow you to connect to your smart home devices while you're not at home and not on your own network, but having them all hosted in the cloud means you're reliant on that cloud service being operational 24/7, and also there's the whole sort of security risk that, you know, that cloud service could be targeted or hacked, and then your smart device, whatever it may be, say a camera, could then sort of potentially be accessed by somebody else. So the last limitation I want to sort of touch on is recurring charges, and what these charges are additional charges that you have to pay in order to use extra features or additions to the products that you've already bought. I always see this as a limitation because you've already physically bought the product and then you're having to spend another monthly amount just to make use of extra things it can do. An example of this is cameras. So some cameras require you to pay for cloud storage in order to save your videos. And again, this might not be a limitation for you because you might be happy to pay that extra bit in order to get that service, but you shouldn't have to pay if you can do it yourself. So then, just to recap on the limitations of a smart home without using a home automation system like HomeAssistant, you have the app segregation, which is where you have the multiple different apps in order to control all of the different devices. You've got the integration sort of reliance, where you're reliant on a manufacturer creating and maintaining an integration in order for your device to work with, say, your Google Home or your Amazon Echo. You're also reliant on cloud services. This is a limitation because it's a single point of failure. You're reliant on the cloud always being working in order for your device to work. And again, that's a security concern as well because you're not in control of that data. That data is elsewhere in the cloud. And then lastly, we have the recurring charges, which is where you're having to pay those extra monthly amounts in order to make use of your services. Now, these limitations are my own opinion, but that's the benefit of designing and creating your own smart home, is you get to pick and choose what you want in the house, and you can fit and design everything to match your needs or your budget or anything like that. There's no sort of right or wrong way of doing things if you're doing it for yourself. So if you have any of these limitations, or you're just looking for a way to get more control over the design or the control over the functionality of your devices, this is where home automation systems and HomeAssistant really come into play. So we've had a look at a smart home and some of the limitations of using a smart home without an automation hub or automation system. Now let's have a look at the benefits of this using HomeAssistant. So what is HomeAssistant? HomeAssistant is an automation hub that allows you to link together multiple brands of devices and components. It's basically that all-in-one thing that does everything. So how we were saying before about how you could use the Google or Amazon app and just pull all these devices in, providing there was an integration. Well, this is what Home Assistant does, but it's on a much bigger scale. And the reason it's much bigger is because all those integrations before were reliant on a manufacturer creating them, whereas Home Assistant is open source, so anybody that wants to tinker can create these integrations to get these devices to work. So even devices that the manufacturer doesn't support the integration, somebody in the community has created or does create this integration, and then you can use that device. Once your Home Assistant instance is running, you can access it through a web page or through a mobile app. There is an app for both Android and iOS. Both the web and the app are fully customizable. You can choose themes and change the designs and layouts for everything. These dashboards feature things like switches, toggles, and sliders that let you fine-tune and control all of your devices. So how it works is you install Home Assistant onto your chosen device. Once you run through the setup, Home Assistant will cleverly start looking for devices on your network. If it finds them, it will automatically pull the integrations in, and those devices will just start working automatically. If it doesn't, you have to do a manual search and find the integration, but it's very simple to do. In a future video, I do plan on covering the installation and setup for Home Assistant on a few of these devices here. Integrations are a massive part of Home Assistant, and finding an integration is as simple as visiting the Home Assistant website and just having a look through. It's sorted by category, and you can also just do a search for something you're after. At the time of recording this, there's currently 1,725 different integrations, and these integrations are all provided and created by the Home Assistant community. Having these community developed integrations means that updates and tweaks come out more regularly, as there's lots of people working on it all the time. In addition to this, there's always good documentation for integrations. The documentation just lists how you set up and configure the particular integration. It also contains instructions and guides, and also examples of how you can use that integration in your own Home Assistant setup. So moving on to automations then. Automations are sort of the main magic of Home Assistant, and this is where you get to link together multiple different devices and control those devices based on a series of actions and events that happen. An example automation that I have in my own setup is I have a couple of presence detection ones. So these ones detect that if nobody is home, something happens. So I have one where if nobody's home, it will send out the robot vacuum to clean the whole house. Home Assistant is custom to you, so you get to design all of your dashboards and interfaces. You can colour them however you want, theme them however you want. All the scripts and automations you write, they're all custom to you too, so you decide what you want to happen, when you want it to happen, and you just have that whole control over everything to do with the whole design and automation aspects. It's all local and private, so everything happens on your instance of Home Assistant, and usually Home Assistant is based in your house on one of those devices you've installed it on. So it's secure because it's in your own house. You don't need any clouds or any subscription services to do or run any of this stuff. Your data is not being sent anywhere, it's just local, you know where it is, and you've got that control over it. So the reason I use Home Assistant is because I just love that flexibility of being able to design and customize everything how I want it. I also love not having this whole app segregation thing anymore. Like, I go to one app, I go to the Home Assistant app, and everything that I need is all there. All of my devices, all of my automations, everything is all just there. I use it because it removes all these limitations I've spoke about in the video. There's a huge following and massive community based around Home Assistant, and wherever you go, whether it's Reddit, Facebook, Home Assistant forums, there's always like-minded people there trying to do similar or the same things as you, and everyone always is willing to share and help each other out. The developers of Home Assistant are super active and are constantly updating Home Assistant based on the community feedback, and it's just constantly changing and becoming better and better. So on to the pros and cons then. These pros and cons are all my own personal opinion. So Home Assistant's free to use. This is massively appealing to anybody, because who doesn't love free stuff? Having everything local and being private because it's all in your own home is another big boost, because, you know, all the security and everything is all maintained by you in your own home. It's cut off from everything else. Automations and integrations are super powerful in Home Assistant. You've got this massive community backing all of these things. You've got people online on the forums, on Reddit, that will help you with automations and anything you need help with in other aspects of Home Assistant. There's constant updates from the developers and the community as well. It can run on lots of different devices, so you're not limited to having to own one particular thing. There's a huge amount of compatibility with lots of devices currently out there and future devices that are coming out. And then onto the cons then. So I've gone with it can be intimidating for new users. This is because you've got to do the whole installation process by yourself. You've got to get the hardware and do the installation. But once you get past that, with the newer versions of Home Assistant now, it's a lot easier to do. And Home Assistant they've also just brought out their Home Assistant Blue, which is Home Assistant that comes pre-installed on a piece of hardware, so you can just pick those up now, which is appealing to newer users. Another con is that it's a very expensive hobby, and if you're anything like me, you always want the sort of latest and greatest, so you're constantly sort of upgrading and changing your devices out, and yeah, it's very expensive when you start building these up and just collecting a few of them. And finally, I've gone with some of the integrations are quite lengthy to set up and install. So with some of the integrations, you have to do quite a bit of work with the configuration files just to get them to work, but it depends what you're sort of doing with Home Assistant, really. Thank you for sticking to the end of this video with me. Hopefully by watching it, I hope you've learned something about smart homes or about Home Assistant. This was my first video, hence why it's so babbly, but I do plan on sort of trying to improve the whole confidence and the production quality. If you do have any suggestions for any feedback on the actual video itself, if you want any anything that I've talked about explaining in more detail, then just drop me a comment below. And I do have a few future videos planned. I'll be going over the installation process of Home Assistant and also some of the topics I've talked about in this video. I'll be breaking those down into smaller videos. Thank you again, and hopefully I'll catch you in the next one.